Right. So just to set the scene, I guess. I mean, as I was saying a few minutes ago, when back 10 or so years ago, most of the housing we built was mainly for housing associations and developers, and very, very little was for councils. And that's almost flipped on its side, really, over more recently. I mean, interestingly enough, 2 years ago, out of the 1,500 homes that were built by councils, we built a third. And our footprint of house building for councils is set to increase substantially over the next couple of years, even from where we are now. And as you know, all our LCOs are building a lot for councils at the moment, and it's great work. It's great work for them. It's great work for us. We leave a lot of legacy, and that's why really I'm really excited that today we're joined by Barbara Brownlee, which is for me a really apt and a great guest to have, because Barbara is a trailblazer in this area, and I think one of the most influential people in housing, because over 10 years ago, she actually started up, one of the first people to start up a company within a council. She was working for Thurrock, and it was called Gloriana. And this was a self-delivery company to build housing for Thurrock, which obviously we as a company were part of. We built a lot of housing, and it was a really good start of things to come for us. And then obviously, since then, we've seen these companies spring up all over the place across all the different councils. And of course, Barbara herself has moved from Thurrock to Westminster, where obviously, talk about being in the public eye. She's now one of the main leaders of Westminster, working as chief executive of Westminster Builds, which is again is a company that Barbara set up to deliver all of Westminster's housing, both in the borough itself and also outside the borough. And she can maybe talk a bit more about that later on. But high-profile job, working right in the centre of London, leading a big team around her to deliver housing, not just for, rich people. This is housing for the whole community. This is about making sure that Westminster has and retains a strong presence of local people, of young people, and that doesn't just is not full of millionaires, that sort of thing. So, so welcome, and thank you very much for joining us, Barbara. Hopefully, I've given you a sufficient entry and intro.
Thanks very much, Andrew. That's a big build-up to follow. Okay, so yes, about how I got started, or I mean,
really just briefly tell us a bit about yourself. How you got into housing, how you set the trend for councils creating their own housing companies. So just a bit of background, really.
Okay. Well, I think probably like a lot of people, I didn't have a career plan, and I fell almost into housing by accident. Whilst I was at uni, I did a bit of voluntary work, and I worked for Women's Aid, and realised that the one thing people needed was their own housing, and that is the first time I ever really thought about it. I went on from there and got a job with Lewisham Council, and worked my way through council sort of housing departments, the whole gamut, homelessness and advice and managing the stuff, and finally got myself to Hackney, where I really landed on my feet in more ways than one, and got into development and regeneration, and just realized that was where my heart was, and that was what I wanted to do. And I kind of say fell on my feet because I probably met my first best sponsor, mentor, whatever you want to take it, person that I learned enormous amounts from, got given a few breaks in about new big projects that I could lead on, and really feel like I learned my trade doing development and regen in Hackney, sort of in the 90s. So that's where it comes from. Yeah.
Wow. And of course, from there you went to Thurrock, and that was really where
I did.
Willmott Dixon first started to work with you, and it was interesting because you had to deliver housing very quickly in Thurrock, didn't you? And use the state framework, which obviously
I did.
A route to market for you at the time, wasn't it?
You're absolutely right, Andrew. In between Hackney and Thurrock was a long period where councils weren't allowed to do much, and I left working for councils because I was so passionate about building, and actually went to work for a private company. who were delivering housing, and then came back to Thurrock because, as you say, 2012, councils were suddenly given the freedom, the Localism Act, to set up their own development company and to build again. And for me, that combination of a council and development has always been the best. That accountability, the fact that you're really doing it for the people of an area, I love. And you're right, I went to Thurrock. It's a big playing field, Thurrock, a lot of land. They wanted housing almost overnight. Thurrock has very what's the right term? Delicate politics. It has elections 3 years out of every 4 and barely ever has an overall majority. When I went, it was in its 2-year period, so 2 years with no elections, which is a long time in Thurrock, and there was an overall majority of 1 for the Labour Party. Now, it goes all ways, this is not a party thing, but there was a stable set of politics in place. And in that window, in 2 years, that council wanted to see homes come out the ground. And so I did what a lot of people do. I mean, you call on teams of people you ask people to bid for work, and we went to the SCAPE framework, which is a fabulous framework. There's no doubt about it. It's speedy, it's instant, it's high quality, and I met you and your colleagues, and you built out 3 major sites for us very quickly in Thurrock, didn't you?
Yeah, I remember. I visited them all actually and seen them at the time. And a lot of pride, and it was great for Thurrock because there's a lot of sense that Thurrock was getting exact sort. It was building these homes to encourage community cohesion. It was a statement of intent for Thurrock, a statement of purpose as to what it wanted to achieve and be, not simply somewhere on the outskirts of London, but a place and a destination in its own right. And that very much really set the template for what's across the country now that all our LCOs are benefiting from. This urgency, this need by councils to build homes, to be in control, not to be at the behest of the whim of developers and others, but to be building homes that meet the needs of the community. And we're seeing that now with yourself when you went to Westminster, you joined Westminster after Thurrock, which is a pretty big hot seat, isn't it? You're right in the thick of it.
Yeah, it was a big change. When I went to Thurrock, the land was worth more for the storage of articulated lorries than for housing, Andrew. And my job really was to raise values, right? To bring some architects to Thurrock, to bring some good developers to Thurrock, to build high quality, well-designed stuff so we could edge prices up a bit. That is definitely not my remit in Westminster and has not been. Yeah. The remit in Westminster is incredibly interesting because it comes from the council's huge commitment to kind of fill the gap in the housing market in Westminster. Westminster's 25% social housing, which, is not something that people would automatically think of. But the other sort of 73% is clearly extraordinarily high-end and expensive. And there's a couple of percent that is what you would call intermediate housing, reasonably priced for ordinary working families have a chance of getting. And I've now worked for 2 consecutive leaders in Thurrock whose both their remit is to build for that squeezed middle, to use a hackneyed phrase, and to provide intermediate housing. Intermediate not in the legal sense, but in the real sense of the word, housing that ordinary working people could afford. So that's the remit, and that's where the company comes in.
And also we've been part of that ourselves with Dudley House and working on Harrow Road now, and hopefully more opportunities for us going forward. Just I suppose, I mean, we've got a lot of people listening who are at various stages of their career, looking at how you've achieved so much. Obviously now at chief executive level, you're working in highly political environments. You work closely with the chief executive of Westminster, you work with the leader of Westminster, all sorts of politicians. So this, you really are, there's no hiding place. And I suppose, just going back as your career developed, I mean, looking at how you evolved, have you faced any adversity being female in your role? And if so, how did you manage this? And what tips and lessons can you pass on to our listeners today out of interest? Okay.
Well, gosh, that's a big question, Andrew. Yes, I think I probably have faced some adversity. Hugely, I think you face it from yourself in terms of, women having enough belief in what they can do rather than other people necessarily stopping you. So one of my biggest bits of, advice and just to think about is it took me, I think, a lot longer than it would have taken a man with exactly the same skills and abilities to get to the position I'm in. I think they'd have got there a lot quicker. Now, that's partly because women take time out for children, and that's a whole other subject we should probably cover, because coming back into the workplace after time out, and caring responsibilities is a big deal. But it's not just about that. It's about actually believing that you can be at the top and run stuff and having the confidence and the support to go for it, which I think, well, certainly for me, it took me longer to get there. I felt I needed more under my belt. I needed to have done more myself before going each step of the way. Whereas around me, I feel like I watched quite a lot of people just take a punt and get it. I am now at that point, right? But I kind of, there's a bit of me wishes I'd been at that point 20 years ago. So my best advice is really go for it before you feel you're 100% ready, because others will, and you probably are fine. You've probably got enough to go for it.
Yeah, and I suppose also you've got people. The main thing is having people around you that want you to win and do well and support you. And that's it. I suppose perhaps previously having a support network around you. Did you find you have that, and did you find you were very much having to push barriers yourself?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, there were not an enormous number of women in development or regen or at senior levels, either in, the private sector or the public sector. More in the public sector, a few more, but there, adult and children's social care is where you found women, not building houses. And certainly, oh gosh, I've worked with demolition companies and, highways contractors, and those places are not particularly, or were not particularly used to dealing with women, and certainly not used to dealing with women clients. So I think some of the other stuff I went through, I mean, I think it's, you walk into those absolutely 100% all male site meetings, pre-contract meetings, and they look at you and, I know it sounds kind of, so predictable, but it is like they think for a minute, are you just going to make the tea, right? Before you sit down and you go, okay, this is mine, I'm running it, and this is how I'd like it to go, And that takes a lot, and you need somebody behind you. And when I first started doing that in Hackney, when I first started being absolutely responsible for stuff on the ground, I used to go home and I used to talk to my dad loads and go, oh my God, I can't do this. And, he was one of my biggest supporters. I had a fabulous, not direct boss, but the guy above, who I just learned from, and who kept saying every time I made a mistake, don't worry, I absolutely know you can do this. So you really need support, I think, both in and outside the workplace.
Yeah, so really good point. Having that support among your colleagues, among your leadership, among, from the end down almost of the business, making sure that it gives you the confidence and self-belief, because you've got potential. It's just making sure we realise that potential, giving you the platform. I mean, looking at how you succeeded, is there any advice, and this could apply to anyone in terms of how their career is progressing, any sort of tips and advice you would give at crucial stages to help them reach those high levels of the leadership ladder?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I mean, it's different for I think everybody needs some support. Absolutely everybody. So one of the key things is if you're not getting it directly from your manager above you, look around. There will be other people out there, and talk to them and tell them what you're doing. Yeah, if you think your skills and your, highlights at work are not being noticed directly, move around a bit and talk to other people in the business and get them noticed, because somebody will spot potential, right? And it doesn't have to be your line manager. You might have to have a brilliant line manager. If you don't feel stuck. Get out from underneath. Volunteer for stuff all the time. I was just horrendously, I'll do it all the way through my 20s and 30s, absolutely. You've got to take on new projects. You've got to try and work out what's important to your company. you know, what's important to Willmott Dixon? Get involved in it if it's important to Willmott Dixon. That's who you work for. I did that in Hackney. They had big stuff around breaking down silos. And I used to volunteer for a lot of stuff and courses and delivery of things in that area. So work out what's going on in your company and try and get yourself involved in the things that are important outside of your job. Prepare that anybody's career definitely contains a lot of hard work, right? There's no pretending it doesn't all happen because you have a great sponsor and you're spotted. I mean, prep and work are not bad things to do before every meeting. Don't go into places not having read stuff that you should have read. Don't go half prepared. You know, it takes a lot of hard work to get going, and yeah, make sure you do it. In the end, the people who don't will be found out. Yeah. And you need some support, and then you need some time away from work. Yeah, it can get very immersive. I've got some great friends. I've got 2 kids. I've got a lot going on outside of work. During one of the biggest things I did, I led the housing on Grenfell. And for years and years and years, I'd wished I could play the piano. I'd really wanted to learn the piano. And honestly, I was working kind of, I don't know, 7 till 10 for weeks and weeks on Grenfell. And I thought, right, I'm going to go mad if I don't do something else. And so I started piano lessons right in the middle of that and have never stopped them. And they are a major part of my life now, and I adore it. So I think when you feel it's taking over too much, think about another part of your life. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, that's what Cressida Dick mentioned as well. Obviously someone similar, high profile, very demanding, lots of question marks around, what are you doing? Lots of pressure, but making sure you deal with that pressure by having a life outside of work and having a properly defined life outside of work, not simply being at the beck and call, answering emails at silly hours and picking up half a Sunday. You do need to, because otherwise you get worn out. It's one of the things, I guess, as a business we're worried about at the moment, because obviously with the COVID pandemic, people haven't been taking their holidays, because where to go, sort of thing. So I'm going to say that's not sustainable, because you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to become tired and weary. You need to have a break away from the coalface in order to be at your best, in order to be fresh and coming up with ideas and pushing forward on new initiatives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm taking the week after next, I've got a week off. I'm only going in Britain, but absolutely, I'm having a week away, and I will walk on, green grass and not London streets, and that would be lovely.
Yeah. Well, just out of interest, one of the questions that someone gave me, which is quite interesting, is in terms of the imposter syndrome, how do you deal with the so-called imposter syndrome? It's not something I'm massively familiar with, but obviously you've come across it yourself.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, every time you sort of look around and think, oh my God, I'm in charge, they can't possibly mean me. I think maybe it's changed. I am 60, when I was brought up, young women were not brought up to be kind of loud leaders, cocky, take charge. Those things were called being bossy, unpleasant. People didn't like that. That's not how you were really brought up. I hope, feminism is beginning to change some of that. But even so, a lot of women don't naturally think of themselves as having the right to take charge. And the only way I have learned to deal with that is to be aware of it, right? Be aware of it, know it exists, know it's what you feel, say it, and then use your network. You have got to have some people around you and say, oh my God, I don't feel like I can do this. I don't feel like I'm up to this. There's no substitute for talking through your fears and somebody who knows you well going, you can. They gave you the job. And remember, every time you feel like that, would a bloke feel like that? Just ask yourself that question. And use somebody you trust and talk it through and listen to them saying you can do it. Yeah.
That's a really interesting point, actually, because I mean, even the language you say, for a guy it's being assertive, and for a woman it's being bossy. That's sort of unconscious bias in a way, isn't it? Which
it
I
is.
We're making strides to try and change, really, because it's a mindset, isn't it?
It is a complete mindset. And, you know, there's no doubt things have changed enormously. And so where I work now in Westminster, I mean, gosh, I mean, the chief steward is so committed, as clearly, you know, Willmott Dixon is, to change, to absolutely turning this around, both in terms of gender and diversity. And we have huge amounts of coaching, mentoring, reverse coaching, you know, so somebody like me will listen to, you know, a woman apprentice coming into the organization and saying, God, this is what it feels like, this is what it looks like, and reflecting back up their experiences so you can use them to make changes.
Yeah.
We have some real structural things in place, like we won't interview above a certain level if the panel isn't diverse. Right. So, you know, if you're going for sort of middle management upwards, there has to be a woman on that panel. There has to be someone who is Black or of an ethnic minority on that panel. So if you're a woman or a Black person who walks in to be interviewed, you are not alone in that room. You're not just facing a sea of white men. So, you know, you've got to get your organization into a certain place. And gender pay gaps still exist. You know, I kind of say I hope it's moved on, but gender pay gaps are real, are absolutely real. And we've all got to publish them, look at them. I really believe in the Hawthorne effect. Keep your eyes on it. It's the only way to focus on it. You know, that gender pay gap will stay exactly as it is if we leave it in a dark corner. Yeah. Drag it out and let's try and address it.
It's interesting because obviously we think we can be very inward looking about it, but as you say, all our customers, they're going through the same similar change, and we need to, if we're going to be successful with customers like Westminster and other local authorities and the customers across the board, we need to reflect and show what we're doing, but is that exactly the same as what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And being seen to be forward-looking, progressive like that, you know, it's this whole area, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
When you look at, I mean, you work with a load of contractors, a load of different organisations, you know, does things like that matter to you when you look at what they're doing?
Oh, it does. It does. It matters hugely, Andrew. If you are spending, you know, millions of pounds on behalf of the public, right, in the public sector, on behalf of your residents, right, and that's kind of literally what you have the power to do, then it's no good thinking 4.5 apprentices and 3 visits to a girls' school, right, a social value are going to crack it, right? Yeah. It's millions of pounds of the money needs a good return for the residents of Westminster. And yet that means high quality buildings of the sort, you know, sustainable buildings and all that jazz. But we need in the public sector to get more for our pounds, spend it more than once. And a culture of an organisation is what will allow us to do that. You know, a good culture, an open culture, a culture that will work with us and will listen to us about what type of social value we want, about what counts in Westminster. We need people who will be able to talk to people at every level in Westminster and our residents, not patronisingly, you know, properly. So yeah, culture matters a lot.
It's really interesting because we launched our a big change strategy, Giant Leap, recently, and one of the ambition, the goals, is that to be the only contractor our customers want to deal with, and this whole diversity and social mobility inclusion, it plays so much into that, because if you're working with a like-minded organisation that's delivering a great product, you're not going to want to upset the apple cart, are you, and go somewhere else, because we are a like-minded organisation, both joined and focused on delivering a fantastic result, which includes legacy, which includes improving society, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. It's difficult though, isn't it? Because at the top of most organisations, let's be honest, they're not very diverse. You know, most boards are not yet diverse. Most senior leadership teams across the piece are not yet diverse. So there is something slightly about asking turkeys to vote for Christmas.
Yeah, I know. And I think that's an interesting point, isn't it? You know, it's I saw today that there's been a shareholder revolt among Barbara Brownlee because they wanted to appoint their chairman, reappoint their chairman, who was a traditional sort of oldish white guy. And the revolt was around, well, hold on, what about your diversity, you know? So by definition, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for people who aren't necessarily white males to sort of, you know, create more diverse leadership teams. Yeah. So therefore, I guess people like me have to compete even harder to be successful.
I don't know. It's got to be the best person wins, right? I don't think anybody. Gosh, I keep getting a funny noise. I don't know if it's my IT or yours.
All right.
Does it sound okay?
Yeah, mine sounds okay. Can you hear me?
I mean, I think nobody's really talking here about, you know, not giving the role to the best candidate, right? It should be the best candidate. But what we are saying is the field from which you pick the best candidate should be wider, right? It should be wider. So don't, in the Balfour Beatty example, you know, don't look about 2 inches away from your nose and pick the best candidate. Look across an acre of field and pick the best candidate. There's certainly more support now. I mean, there's women leadership courses, aren't there? There's women how to get onto boards, all that stuff that women kind of don't instinctively get brought up with. Oh, well, you know, do this role and the next role is on the board, kind of let's have a chat about that. That sort of thing just doesn't happen to women very often. So, you know, but there are some real support mechanisms being put in place now to get more women on boards. And there's no doubt, once women are there, they will bring up other women. I really believe that. Yeah, I really believe that. People kind of have networks a little bit in their own image. You know, I've worked in housing. You said this at the beginning, and I was kind of slightly ashamed of myself almost at this moment in my career, because I've worked in housing and in London for years and years, and I thought I knew not all, but loads of the really good senior people, right? And then we employed a black woman at a senior level in Westminster to do a big turnaround job for us. She was fantastic. She was absolutely excellent. And so she went out to her network to recruit, right, for her direct reports. And you know what? Her network is entirely black. And I didn't know any of them. And you just think you spend your whole career trying to be open, you know, and do more. And you can always learn and always do better. Yeah. So we get some women on the board, more women will follow.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about moving out of your comfort zone and reaching into parts that perhaps we partially haven't done. We've been very safe and secure in our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And really, to improve as a business, we always need to be outside that comfort zone and challenge ourselves, you know, and that applies across the board as well as it applies to leadership and how we improve as people as well, you know. Don't be safe and secure, because you'll never develop as skill sets.
And I couldn't agree more, Andrew. You are so right. I mean, it's when you go into work with a slightly nervous flutter in your stomach, thinking, can I do this? That you're actually, you know, going onwards and upwards and doing something good and pushing yourself. And if you don't have that, then you're kind of, well, for me, I feel like I'm not going somewhere. There's always got to be the next thing that makes you a bit nervous about, am I going to be able to deliver this properly? Yeah. Yeah. Out of your comfort zone is the exact truth. The other thing I think I've learned is don't expect to get where you want by sitting in one employer for 20 years. You know, I've got my best promotions moving around. You have to do it. You have to look around. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've always had a mantra about career of a lifetime, and in fairness, I suppose the success of that is about making sure that people feel that their careers, their challenges, their opportunities, everything they need from a rewarding job can be fulfilled at Willmott Dixon. And that's our big challenge to say. I mean, I suppose some sectors people move around a bit more than other sectors, but and obviously from yourself, I mean, even though you've moved around in organisations, you've stayed very focused on your core product is about delivering much needed housing for communities, you know, and it's about moving around, fair enough, but you leave a legacy of housing that thousands of people now enjoying and building thriving communities. And we're obviously part of that journey with you, and we want to be part of that going forward, you know. And that's the key thing for us. And how do we, as a business, as an organisation, stay relevant to customers like yourself, because that's always got to be at the back of my mind, There's no point looking back on the past, we've got to look back to the future. How do organisations like Willmott Dixon stay relevant to big customers like Westminster with huge programmes? Because obviously you're looking at building homes outside Westminster as well as inside Westminster. And I suppose that's a really interesting thing that's worth exploring as a customer.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, if you look at what Willmott Dixon have done by doing the frame, the scape framework was one of the best things for your customers. I mean, what did the industry realise? Public procurement is long and complex and difficult. Let's set this framework up. It really works for you and the others on it, and it really works for your clients. We get high quality, which is publicly procured fast, and that's an incredible answer. And I guess the things that we are now really looking to have answered are sustainability questions, right? Hugely. It's still always speed of development. It still always is. So I guess, MMC comes into it, the whole, what can we do? There's not an enormous amount within Westminster because the sites are small and tricky, but outside of Westminster, and you're right to say we're building outside. So I think sustainability is a big issue. I think knowing we're dealing with an organisation that is diverse, has an open culture and, and embraces kind of gender diversity at every level is a huge plus with your customers, a huge plus, and will be reflected in every way, 1,000 small ways about how you approach things, how you bid. I think there's something very particular about post-COVID. We are struggling to think about design, rethinking some of our design because of, how are people going to work in the future, and that whole agenda of, are we building bigger, how much space, what sort of outdoor space. And I think you and I maybe have talked before about this. There is, in terms of the speed thing, there's something about different offers that Willmott Dixon, I think, are on the verge of making, which is, your clients, if you're dealing with public sector clients, right, they invest very heavily and for both financially and for a long period of time in things that really amount to trying to de-risk. Yeah, if you look at them. So all of the pre-contract work, all the design, all the value engineering, the cost consultancy, all those professional fees, right, are very important to local authorities, but they cost the most enormous amount of money and they take a very long time to perform. So, something around that, something about realizing that your clients do need to de-risk things through using those disciplines. But at the minute, it's the most unwieldy, long, complicated and expensive manner of doing it that we have. So I don't know. I think those are the areas that local authorities are really thinking about at the minute.
Just one area that I know we're going to start with people. Just one that really intrigues me is the future of the high street and obviously and how things are changing now, and how we as a contractor, as a construction firm, need to adapt to that. Because it's not all about how it used to be. There's new rules of the game now. There's new property. And I mean, in your view, how do you think local authorities, particularly, are going to respond to the challenge of reinvigorating their high streets?
I mean, that is a huge question, and it's going to have a lot of different answers, isn't it? There's going to be areas that will become residential. Yeah, now that's not going to be Oxford Street. It's not going to be the CAS, the core zone of commercial activity in London. It's not going to be Westminster's main high street. But certainly if you go further out in the borough, there's areas around the Harrow Road where you could shorten what is a struggling high street, and instead of just allowing it to informally become residential in a pretty poor manner, to actually grasp that and lead the way and have high quality residential in areas that are really not working. Then I think there's a bit just diversity. So, in Westminster, there was a rule which was so solid and golden that it almost doesn't need to be spoken, which is the ground floor is retail. Yeah, it can't be an office, It can't be a restaurant. It can't be, you know, it is a shop. Now that rule, I think, has gone out the window. Yeah. The ground floor has to be activated, and the ground floor has to be fun and has to bring some life in. But it could be a lot of different things. So that golden rule in our planning is changing. So, you know, I think contractors can come in there with ideas, because also those ground floor frontages are now no longer forever. You know, there's the whole commercial property world is re-looking at leases, at how long, how heavy, you know, how it is catching up fast with a world where pop-ups happen, people start smaller businesses with much less asset behind them. You know, there's not any big corporates taking 20-year leases in the middle of London anymore. There's tiny coffee shops and bike repair shops and, you know, pop-up flower merchants want something for 6 months to see if they can make it work.
That's a good point. That applies to all the towns and cities. Just one other thing. I know, obviously, where you work in Westminster, you have the chief executive, you have the leader. It's a very high profile, quite a political environment. I mean, how do you sort of tread that wisely, and how do you thrive in that high environment where the wrong word or someone, you know, not agreeing with something can often spell doom?
I mean, you leave your politics at home, right? I would hope nobody where I work knows what my politics are. You know, you just leave them at home. Well, there's two things for me. One is I love it because working in a political environment is very actively near the residents. You know, they voted this leadership team in, whoever it is, but the residents voted them in. Yeah. And that is really whoever it is. And I've worked for a wide range of councils, right? Of every political colour. But at least you know you're following the agenda of the people who live there, or the majority of the people who live there at that moment. So there's something really good about doing that. It's very direct. And the other thing is, I think I have whatever you think about people's politics and whichever way, I have an immense respect for people who put their job on the line every 4 years, right? And go, okay, is what I did good enough? Do you want me to carry on or not? You know, you don't do that. I don't do that. Probably people on this call don't do that. So I really respect that. So I kind of see those people who are elected in as having a right to lead and a right to set the direction and policy. And, you know, if you don't like it, you can always leave. In the end, you can choose who you work for. But I enjoy that. Then you're kind of, you know, on a light-hearted level, there is language. There is a language. And the authority I worked in before this one, I can't even remember what it was now, but when the housing benefit, as everybody in the world called it, the housing benefit cap came in, I had a director of housing who worked for me. And if you said that, right, he got his knees chopped off, right? Because that was not the correct term and had a political bias to it. I think it's the social housing something. It was a mile long, the real phrase for it, but that's what you had to say always. So there is a language thing comes in.
It's interesting also, talking about people who work for you, teams around you. I mean, you've got a great network of people that work for you and are now doing great things at Greenwich or that sort of thing. I mean, how do you, as a leader, build strong, loyal, committed teams around you? Because we're doing that. You know, our future leaders will need to do that. They'll need to have loyal people around them that deliver. So what advice would you give them as to building up those strong, supportive, loyal people that work for them and really committed to the cause?
Okay. I mean, if you're enjoying what you're doing, right, your enthusiasm has to come through. And, you know, I can't help it. I'm just massively passionate and enthusiastic about development and regeneration. I love it. And so I think that comes through. And I think so people who work for me aren't bored. They know why they're there, right? They're there because development and regen is really important to me. And if it's important to them, then that's, you know, they enjoy that. I think on a generic level, listen to your teams, listen, you know, things have changed so much since I came into this business, so much that you learn something every day if you bother to listen to people. And if you listen to people, you find out how they're feeling, you learn more about them, they can deliver more, you can enable them to deliver more, right? I think the job as a leader is a little bit like being a conductor. It's about making sure people play to their strengths and know how they fit into a team. So you have to have a team overview, and you absolutely have to allow people to play to their strengths and open things up for them, respect them all, and let people make mistakes. Have some fun. At one point in my life, when I was working on a really gritty project, I won't even name it, actually, it was so gritty. We had a rule in the team: every Friday lunchtime, we went out and we went to see a great building or a wonderful design, and somebody picked it every week, and then we had a drink. Yeah. And we got through the week knowing on a Friday afternoon we were going to go somewhere, see something new, innovative, well designed, something relevant, and then go and have a few cocktails. And it helps if things get rough in a team.
Yeah, that's really good, actually. How you unwind, how you sort of, and also not having the fear factor. I like the idea you can make mistakes, because obviously if you don't make mistakes, you don't learn. But sometimes people are fearful about making mistakes, or they cover up mistakes because they think, well, you look bad. But it's not about looking bad, is it? It's about learning.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, if there's one thing people at the beginning of their career should know, the only thing that's difficult is not knowing what's gone wrong. Isn't it? Honestly, if you don't find out quickly enough, the only thing that I can't help with is if I don't know it's gone wrong. I don't mind ever it's gone wrong, because 99% of the time you can put it right really easily, really easily. It just, if things don't come back up and people hide them, then that is disastrous for a project. It's disastrous because it'll come out right at the end and then you can't put it right.
And we've seen that. We've seen that here. Some people doing that, and you say it just makes it a whole lot worse.
Yeah.
If you evolve, if you collaborate, if you work with people, talk it through, communicate early, and that includes with the customer. I mean, from a customer perspective, you want to hear about things sooner rather than later.
Definitely.
I remember the mantra, no nasty surprises.
Yeah. But you're right to say people have to feel confident. They won't come and say, oh my God, this has completely gone wrong around my ankles here, unless they feel safe doing that. No, if people are worried they're going to lose their job or get demoted or something, or even just get yelled at, all of that has to be so far away from your culture. It's got to be, that can happen to all of us. Let's put it right, and then let's see what we learn and see what you need to learn so it doesn't happen again. It's.
Yeah, I have worked in previous companies where there was that culture of aggressiveness and yelling. Sometimes people would often be aggressive because they hid their own shortcomings. So it's about being confident in your own skin as a leader, being confident in your own skin.
Yeah, it is. That's the sort of advice my dad used to give me a lot of, actually. He said, look him in the eye. They're only people. If they're shouting at you, probably they've had a bad start to their day. They're probably just miserable. Just ignore it. Yeah.
No, it's a good point, actually. And just I suppose, if you could go back and change one thing in your life and your career, what would you do differently? What do you do differently, or what would you change?
Oh, what a good question. What a good question. I tell you what, I'd have taken more time out for my small child when he was little, for my son when he was small.
Yeah.
And that's quite a hard one. And I was working huge hours then, kind of trying to get up a bit of a ladder and make a career. And when my son was small, so I wish now I'd taken more time out. So think about a balance. I would say think about a balance. You will get, if you're good and you take some risks and you talk to people and are open about learning, you have a great career. Anyway, you don't need to work 12-hour days. Take time out for other things that you want. So that's one of them. And the other one for me is, I think just go for bigger jobs quicker. I should have gone for bigger. I think women tend to go up in small increments. Just every now and then try a massive jump and see what sort of feedback you get. Yeah, and listen and learn from the feedback. Don't take, if you don't get the job, don't take that as a bad thing. Take it as what I had a brilliant, opportunity to learn what interviews at that level are like, to hear some decent feedback, demand decent feedback. But every now and then take a punt and go for something you think, I am only a third qualified for this, but I'd love it. And I'm going to learn from the process. I wish I'd done a little bit more of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, that has come back before actually, where like men, for example, they will go for jobs where they don't feel they're qualified for, but they'll go for them, and whereas perhaps women won't, or opportunities, and that probably does unfairly hold them back, and that's something that as a mindset that we need to tackle, don't we, and change.
Yeah, definitely. And that I guess that's about putting, women having the chance to build supportive networks, feeling like their boss does support them, feeling like they're in a bit of an open organization where if you go for a job and don't get it and people find out, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
People see going for a job as a learning thing.
Just by the way, if anyone's got any questions, they're most welcome to put them on the chat feed as well. But I suppose in terms of the future, where do you think that local authorities, the challenges, where will they lie that we need to be aware of? Obviously, you've got COVID, you've got budget restraints. There's obviously a lot of house building going on, which is great. But from your perspective, where do you think are going to be the key pinch points that we actually need to be aware of and sensitive to when it comes to local authorities and public sector organisations?
We thought post-Grenfell and post-Brexit was pretty difficult. Then we kind of got COVID, so, I mean, you are right to put funding pinch points up there. Yeah. So, and the whole adult social care, if you're looking at across the piece at local authorities and not just at their development and housing sort of functions, Andrew, I mean, adult social care has got to be one of the biggest, most costly, least resolved areas of local authorities delivery. And we've just had yet another Queen's speech which didn't really address that. So for colleagues of mine in the adult social care world, it's deeply frustrating. So I think there might be something around, for us to take around building the right sort of housing for older people and how we do that, because that population is growing. And at the minute, the offer for older people and people who need some level of support and care is kind of 1950s. There's pockets of excellence, but not across the country. There's not a fabulous, sustainable, supportive, agile solution for older people's housing. And I think we'll be looking at lots of that as we go forward. And what else? Gosh, I don't know. Challenges. Opening high streets, that's where all local authorities are at the moment. You've already taken us there.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from our perspective, I mean, you've got a lot of funds coming up from the Levelling Up Fund and the High Streets Fund and the Towns Fund, so there's money out there. But, so how do we see from that? Because we want to be part of that journey. We want to be your partner to say we can come to you with ideas and thoughts, and rather than just waiting for you to have the ideas and solutions, and we come up with those sort of things ourselves.
Then I think, I mean, you're right. Although I think London local authorities see a lot of funding going up north. So there you say that. I mean, the whole levelling up thing is taking a lot of money out of the southeast. But, the southeast was funded heavily. I think maybe it's about joining local authorities, not just long before, long before you get into a contractual relationship, but on their round tables, on their think pieces about sustainability, about solutions for them, that, join local authorities as a partner. Yeah, I think it's a huge thing. There's almost every single local authority in the country has some sort of company now. Now that's easy to say. A lot of them are Almos, a lot of them came out of CCT and aren't doing much. But, more and more are developing delivery companies and do that with more or less levels of expertise in the organisation. So get somebody in who can help them, who can talk to them about what that means, what, the reality of how difficult development is really. I think there could be support for local authorities there. That is much, much needed. And, you know, someone like Willmott Dixon knows local authorities. Did we get a couple of questions there?
Yeah, just thanks. I've got one here. What advice would you give to someone going into leadership position for the first time?
To your team, your new leadership team, right? Ask them all out for a cup of coffee and a bun, right? You need allies, you need mates, you need friends at that level. You need to understand that team. Yeah, so you've gone up, but you're just still part of a team. So don't think it's all about managing and delivery. You have to put a percentage of your effort into your new leadership team, whatever it is. And it's really worth that initial investment, so that when you're around that table with those leaders, you know people and you know what is important to them and where they might be coming from a bit. So strong relationships on your new level. And listen, start the first time if you just promoted, have a meeting with whoever it is, you know, if it's 900, you know, people on the tools. I would have once had 900 caretakers, or is a team of, you know, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 execs below you. Then have that meeting and openly and personally talk to them. Tell them something real about yourself. You know, don't hide behind a desk and a title. Come out. And it's quite nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking to do that as a new leader. But I think if you give something of yourself personally to your team, you will get a lot back from them.
It's a really good point, actually. I know when John Waterman a couple of years ago did his conference, he talked about his background, and I found that really refreshing, actually, to hear about his background, you know, his family, because it makes you human, doesn't it? You know, that's that person that's a suit or something. You're actually a person that you relate to and you want to work with and be successful with, don't you? It's quite a key thing, that actually. It shows something.
Yeah, but I once had a boss, Andrew, and honestly, I was supposed to, it almost shot me off my seat. Brand new boss to a London local authority, came from up north, tight team of 5 people working from to deliver huge change in a borough. First ever management team meeting, and he opened it by going, right, I'm going to tell you something about myself, right? I'm married, I've got 4 kids under 5, and I love sex. And that was how he opened the meeting. Oh my God. But you know what? It's one of the tightest teams I've ever been in. Right? People became genuine friends, and you deliver more.
They mould it. You bond, you mould, don't you?
You do.
Everyone's in it to everyone else, and I think why not? You know, I've got another question actually. On your recent interview with, I think it was NLA, Peter Murray, you said, you know, knowing your brand and your product has such advantages. Do you think this has helped you find that progress in your leadership position? Does knowing your brand, your product, does this help you relate to your team, your customers, your contractors, that sort of thing?
Let me see. I'm not sure what is that getting at? As a leader, does she think this helped? Hang on, I'm just looking at it. I mean, I think find progress to our leadership. Does this help her? I think in terms of the leadership, knowing your brand is about authenticity. And we've talked about that. And I think that takes a while because you have to relax. Yeah. And certainly, you know, 10 years ago, I was probably not as relaxed as a leader. Yeah. So in terms of leadership position, I think knowing your brand does have huge advantages because you can be open and relax about stuff much better. And yes, I think I think it does help you relate. Sorry, I'm reading the rest of the question to your team and contractors, because you stop worrying about saying the stupid things, right? You know, you can say to a contractor, when I first started, I thought, oh, you know, can I say I don't like that little thing in that corner, or why have you done that? I'm not sure. And you're very nervous about everything. Now I kind of think, you know, I'm going to ask those questions. I don't mind how silly I look. I really don't mind. So it does, if you know your own brand and what you want and what you stand for, and you're confident in that and what you're trying to deliver, then yeah, you can ask any question you want, without feeling nervous about asking a daft question. That's what I would say.
Just in terms of most of us have involve speaking to customers, like yourself and others. What's the best way? What's your advice on how we interact, how we project our leadership, how we impress them, and how we build that bond and rapport with our customers? Because that's the key thing. Because our goal is we don't want anyone else. We want to be a customer of choice, a technical choice for our customers. How do we build that strong?
Okay. Well, I am in the middle of judging, right, along with many other people, supply chain of the year or something for some award. And I have now read about my 10th entry. And I have to say, I now think they're written in Chinese, right? Because I don't understand them. They are a string of letters. They are gobbledygook. And they are the sort of words that people think you want to hear. So you can pick out collaboration is written every other sentence. I don't know, the sustainability is scattered around. And then there's a whole heap of jargon, which is driving me mad. Yeah. And the first person who writes a bloomin' application that goes, we think we did a really good job because, we were nice to each other and we were honest and we wrote down what we all wanted on our supply chain, will win, I tell you. So be straightforward, be open, be honest, and try and drop jargon. Yeah. And I think the public sector, in some instances, has quite a sophisticated relationship now with people like yourselves. It's gone a long way. We are absolutely respectful of your role and that you deliver and have knowledge we haven't, and an expertise we haven't, and that's what we're buying. And I think if you've got a good client, they're not frightened to hear you say that this is what we're good at. These are the things we deliver well, not these, and we're not going to pretend these things are really good. So be open with your client. They're probably a bit more mature than you imagine about how they deal with the private sector.
Yeah. Really good. Another really good question. What advice would you give in terms of influencing upwards to instigate change and buy-in? So that's dealing with your leader and your chief executive. How would you?
Yeah. Okay. Understand what their priorities are. Right. If you want to start a new little project, for me, for example, all I care about is building bungalows right round, I don't know, Mayfair. I've got a leader at the minute who is entirely consumed with the fact that the West End has lost 90% footfall, business rates are down, businesses are on the verge of going, disappearing.
Yeah.
Understand their priorities, understand them. You can't just throw your priorities at a senior level into the mix from cold. Check out where the organization's going. Think about what it has said its priorities are, and then try and work around those. Yeah, work around those. You're not going to get your leader or your chief to do an entire left turn, or it's unlikely, I would think. What you might get them to do is on their trajectory, think about something else as well that you want in that mix. Mm-hmm. And, people above you always want to look good. Make them look good. Make them look good. That's a lot of it. A lot of people have gone far on that.
I know that's Rick's, one of Rick's big mantras is that we need to make our customers look good, because we've done a good job.
Well, you did that in Thurrock, I tell you, Andrew. You did that in Thurrock. You did it proud in Thurrock and Dudley.
Dudley House, I know what a
fabulous. Yeah.
And that's one of the big efforts for us in terms of how we deliver highly urbanized, high-rise resi, deliver it succinctly, successfully. We even changed the design because of growth, didn't we, very quickly? Yeah. And off our own initiative, which is fantastic. Yeah. We could have just plowed ahead and thought, well, it's someone else's problem down the line. But no, we thought we were very proactive and did a great job there. And I know that we're on site now, and hopefully, going forward. I know you mentioned other sites. Just a message really to the rest of the team. If you're aware of other sites in the southeast or wherever that you think Barbara and Westminster should look at, I mean, just out of interest, why are you looking at other sites outside Westminster to develop?
Okay, we're looking at the growth corridors. We're looking at things not huge though, because we haven't done one yet. So between 50 and 150, and if bigger than that, with a partner, and most likely in partnership.
Yeah. What in terms of equity partnership or
any considered? Yes, an equity partnership, but that's not what we need. I mean, it's about sharing risk in our first venture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so southeast growth corridor, So if anyone has a site or is aware of any opportunities, then please let Barbara know, because
give us a ring. Yeah, do.
Yeah, any ideas like that. I mean, we're pretty much at the end now, actually, and it's flown by like it normally does.
Oh.
And it's been brilliant, and I really enjoyed this. And is there any closing out thoughts, comments you'd give to our sort of team here?
Oh gosh.
In terms of how they reach the next level, what they need to do.
Just, I feel like I'm repeating myself. I'm trying to think of something different to say. Listen, take advice, from people you trust.
Yeah.
But don't doubt yourself. Really don't. And unless you step forward, nobody's going to see how good you are. If you just go home every night quietly and think, oh, nobody's bothered me again and I did these 10 amazing things, somehow you have to tell them, right? Yeah. Somehow you have to get your amazing stuff under a light.
Visibility is everything. I mean, I can remember other companies, I think, are doing a great job and bringing new ideas to the table, and that no one knows, no one sees, no one appreciates. So,
and sometimes know when to move on.
Yeah.
If you're stuck in a company and you honestly know you want to go further and higher and it's not happening, have a direct conversation with your boss. Again, screw up your courage, it takes a lot. But have that conversation and then move on. If you can trust your instinct, you'll know if there's nothing there.
And the good thing about Willmott Dixon, we do have lots of opportunities. We're a growing business, so hopefully your people's career aspirations, their challenges, what they want to achieve, that should be there for them to do that. But so that's been really, really brilliant. Thanks, Barbara. And once again, back in the day in Thurrock, and I think I
loved it.
I introduced you once to a board director from News International. I just remember seeing your face, I think he was the commercial director of the News International, and back in the day, and when he announced who he was, and you still pulled it.
Oh yeah, I would have done. I would be better now. I can handle it now. Meet those people in Westminster. Yeah. Remember, they're only people. They might be above you in a hierarchy, but they're only people. Yeah. No, it's great. I've loved it. I've enjoyed it. I should finish on, there is your sites in Thurrock. People could have eaten their dinner off, Andrew. They were so good. Totally clean and organised.
Thanks, and don't forget, that's where we want to be, as an organisation. So, that's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know that we've had some fantastic comments in, and thank everyone for giving me the time, and Barbara too. And we'll see you all. We've got more fantastic guests lined up over the next few months. I'll let you know soon who they are. And Barbara, also, you're welcome to join us, because we've got a bit of a movement going.
Okay. All right then. See you soon, Andrew. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Cheers.